Beneath these mountains, there is a secret Nazi base that was never supposed to be found. It does not appear on any map. There are no official records. And when people finally managed to open part of it, they discovered unfinished tunnels, abandoned equipment, along with signs suggesting this place may never have truly been abandoned. But the most terrifying part is that some of the steel doors beneath that mountain have never been opened to this day. After World War II ended, a remote mountain region in Europe was almost completely erased from military records. No signs. No official access routes. And for decades, the people living nearby kept telling the same strange story. At night, they could hear sounds like machinery echoing up from underground. Sometimes, during the freezing winter, heat would escape from cracks in the mountainside as if something below was still operating. A few people once tried to go deeper, but all they found were entrances sealed shut with thick concrete and rusted steel doors. What became even more suspicious happened after the war. The Allied forces sealed off the entire area for many years. Numerous related documents vanished without a trace. Some aerial reconnaissance photographs were classified top secret, and many tunnels beneath the mountain never appeared on any military maps. But if this place was only an ordinary bunker, then why were dozens of kilometers of tunnels intentionally erased from every existing record? When the remaining files from the end of World War II were compared with old reconnaissance images, something strange began to emerge. Beneath those seemingly desolate mountains, the Nazis had built one of the largest underground systems ever discovered in Europe. Not a small bunker for shelter, but an enormous network carved deep into the mountain itself. The few surviving documents show that thousands of prisoners of war were forced to work day and night under conditions that were nearly impossible to survive. They blasted through solid rock with explosives and industrial drills for months without stopping. Many of them never came back out. But what shocked researchers the most was that the scale of this structure went far beyond any normal military necessity at the time. Inside the mountain were industrial elevators large enough to transport equipment weighing dozens of tons. There was an independent power system running kilometers deep underground. Massive ventilation pipes were designed as if this place was meant to remain operational for a very long time. And even deeper, secret rail tracks disappeared into the darkness. Everything was built during the final stage of the war, when Nazi Germany was already on the verge of complete defeat. So why were they still pouring enormous resources into building this place? That question remains unanswered by historians to this day. And the deeper people went into the tunnel system, the stranger everything became. Many years after the war, the first survey teams began entering the remaining intact tunnels. At first, they believed this was simply an abandoned military facility. But the more they explored, the more they realized the structure beneath the mountain resembled a deliberately designed labyrinth rather than a conventional bunker. Some corridors led to sealed concrete rooms with no windows at all. Other rooms contained only unusually thick steel walls, as if they had been built to isolate something inside. Large cables ran across the tunnel ceilings and continued downward into deeper levels whose endpoints could not be determined. Even more disturbing, some sections appeared to have been intentionally destroyed from within. Not by bombs, but as if someone had deliberately collapsed the tunnels before leaving. Survey teams had to crawl through cracked concrete debris in near total darkness. Flashlights swept across damp walls covered in dust. The sound of dripping water echoed through the empty space. And on several old steel doors, faded German markings could still be seen beneath the rust. One researcher once described the feeling as walking into a place where time had been frozen since 1945. But the strangest thing was that no one knew what the lower levels had been used for. A few old diagrams showed only the upper sections of the system. The rest was completely missing or intentionally removed. It seemed that the deepest areas beneath the mountain had never been fully documented in any official record. And that was when the theories began to appear. Some believed the site had once been a secret Nazi weapons research facility. Others thought it may have been used to develop jet technology or experimental energy systems for late-war military projects. Several post-war documents mentioned the phrase Special Weapons Program, and even more notably, Deep Underground Section, Deep Underground Area. But whenever the records began mentioning the most important part, the following pages would disappear. Not burned, not damaged. They simply no longer existed. As if someone had intentionally erased the most critical information before the world could ever see it. That only made the mystery grow larger. If this was just an ordinary military bunker, why hide the underground structure so extensively? The answer seemed to lie in the things left behind inside the tunnel system. During later investigations, research teams discovered numerous objects abandoned in the darkness for decades. Gas masks were scattered along the stone walls. Old generators sat covered in dust but still connected by intact wiring. Several steel containers remained completely locked, with no one knowing what was inside. And then they found tunnels that had never been completed. Some tunnels ended abruptly in the middle of the mountain, as if construction had stopped moments before completion. But what was difficult to explain was that much of the equipment inside did not resemble ordinary military machinery from the 1940s. There were control panels with unusually complex wiring systems, large metal structures with unknown functions, and steel chambers designed to be almost completely sealed. Some experts believed the site may have been prepared for something far larger than a normal military facility. And if the Nazis truly had enough time to evacuate before the war ended, then why was so much equipment left completely intact? Why did they not destroy the entire system? Or was whatever lay deeper below too dangerous to approach again? The more researchers studied the site, the more they realized they might not have seen the entire structure. Many decades after the war, modern ground-penetrating radar began scanning the structure beneath the mountain. The results shocked even the experts. Behind many rock walls that appeared completely solid, enormous empty spaces existed. Some buried tunnels led to deeper structures below. The reflected signals suggested the system contained multiple layers stacked on top of one another like a multi-level underground city. One researcher estimated that everything humanity has discovered so far may account for only 30 to 40% of the entire facility. The remaining sections still lie somewhere beneath hundreds of meters of granite. And then everything changed. When an expedition team decided to go deeper than anyone ever had before. So deep. They began finding things that should not still exist after nearly a century buried beneath the mountain. The expedition team entered the tunnel system in early winter, when most of the mountain paths had already been covered in snow. They brought geological scanning equipment, thermal cameras, and backup oxygen supplies, because no one knew exactly how far the tunnels below extended. From the very first meters, everything already began to feel unusual. The air below was dense and cold as if no human had entered the place for many decades. Several electronic devices constantly experienced signal interference even though they had functioned perfectly before descending. The lights on the helmets occasionally flickered before returning to normal, with no one able to explain why. The deeper they went, the more they realized the place was larger than any map had ever described. Old rail tracks continued through the darkness as if leading toward an even deeper section inside the mountain. On the concrete walls, many German warning symbols were still clearly visible beneath thick layers of dust. Several steel doors remained completely sealed, yet strangely many of the systems inside did not look abandoned after nearly a century. One member of the team later recalled, "It felt like this place had been sealed shut, but not abandoned." That statement quickly became something that haunted the entire group. After nearly 2 hours of moving through narrow corridors and collapsed tunnel sections, the expedition team discovered an area completely different from the rest of the facility. Behind cracked concrete from an old collapse, stood a gigantic steel door. It was larger than any bunker door they had ever seen. The metal layer was unusually thick, covered in rust yet barely deformed. More importantly, the locking mechanism was located on the outside, as if whatever had been inside was intentionally trapped there. The surrounding silence was so complete that only the sound of breathing echoed through the gas masks. Several members of the team suggested turning back, but in the end, they decided to open the door. It took nearly an hour to break through the old locking system. And when the steel door slowly opened, everyone immediately fell silent. Inside was a chamber that remained almost completely intact. Dust-covered machinery sat motionless beneath dim light. Old control panels were still mounted to the walls with rows of switches and gauges that had stopped functioning long ago. Large electrical cables ran along the ceiling before disappearing into another tunnel at the far end of the room. The camera slowly moved across each dark corner. Heavy echoes filled the enclosed space. And then the flashlight stopped at the end of the chamber. That was when the entire team realized this was not a normal technical area. At the far end of the room was another tunnel. But this time, it had been completely welded shut with multiple layers of thick steel. Faded red warning markings and several German words still remained visible on the metal surface despite the passing time. Right beside the sealed entrance, they found burned documents scattered across the floor. Several technical diagrams showed the tunnel system continuing even deeper underground. But the final section of the drawings had been torn away. Intentionally. As if someone did not want anyone to know what existed below. Among the remaining burned papers, one line captured the group's attention. Section sealed permanently. The area has been permanently sealed. But sealed from what? That was what made everything truly terrifying. If this was only an abandoned military section, why lock it behind such a massive steel barrier? And why was the locking mechanism located outside, instead of inside? Several members of the team began to believe the area had once contained something too dangerous to approach again. But what happened next was what truly kept the entire group awake for months afterward. As they continued surveying the chamber, thermal devices suddenly detected warm airflow moving from behind the sealed steel barrier. That was almost impossible, because the entire system beneath the mountain should have lost power and stopped functioning in 1945. Yet the warm airflow still existed. And that was not all. Several electromagnetic detectors continuously picked up weak fluctuations near the sealed section. At first they assumed it was equipment failure. But after multiple cross-checks, the results remained identical. Something behind that steel barrier was producing a signal. Weak. Unstable. But real. One member of the team claimed he could even feel a faint vibration beneath the concrete floor while standing near the sealed door. It did not feel like an earthquake. It sounded more like machinery operating deep beneath the earth. No one spoke for several minutes. Because everyone understood what that could mean. Either the underground system had never been completed, or some part of it was still functioning. And if that was true, who had maintained it for all those years? That question completely changed the atmosphere within the group. The expedition transformed from a historical survey into something far more frightening. They decided to leave the area before continuing any deeper. But after the discovery was officially reported, even stranger things began happening. Some of the team's records suddenly disappeared from digital archives only weeks after being submitted. Photographs of the sealed section no longer appeared in the official report. And not long afterward, local authorities restricted access to the entire mountain region. The only explanation given was structural collapse risk. But many people did not believe that explanation. Especially after several researchers involved in the expedition suddenly refused all interviews related to the discovery beneath the mountain. A few people disappeared completely from public view. No articles. No statements. No explanations. As if they had been told to remain silent. That only caused the mystery to spread even faster. Because by that point, the question was no longer whether the secret base existed, but rather, what was hidden behind the permanently sealed section. And that was when the story shifted into something even more frightening than the base itself. After the discovery beneath the mountain, a theory began circulating within the military history research community. Perhaps this place had never been built as a normal bunker, but instead as a facility designed for long-term survival underground. When the surviving diagrams were combined with modern radar data, many experts noticed a terrifying detail. Some of the deepest tunnels did not lead outside the mountain like conventional bunker structures. Instead, they continued descending even lower, as if the entire complex contained additional unexplored levels. That convinced many people that everything discovered so far was only the upper portion of the system, and the most important section still remained buried far below. But what made this theory even more disturbing were the remaining technical signs still found inside the facility. During multiple investigations, experts recorded weak airflow still circulating through the underground ventilation system. Several electrical lines within the sealed section had not completely corroded despite nearly a century passing. That should have been almost impossible in a structure abandoned since 1945. One engineer involved in the survey stated, "It feels like part of this place is still being maintained. No one knows what that means. No one knows what still exists beneath hundreds of meters of granite." But if this entire place truly had been abandoned since 1945, then who, or what, has maintained it for all these years? Even today, many areas beneath that mountain have never been fully explored. Some tunnels collapsed long ago. Others remain buried behind meters of thick concrete. And somewhere in the darkness beneath the mountain, there are still steel doors that no one has ever opened. No one knows exactly how large the system truly is. No one knows what was once hidden beneath it. Perhaps this was only a desperate military project during the final days of World War II. Or perhaps, the most important thing inside that secret base is still lying somewhere beneath hundreds of meters of granite, waiting to be found.